pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
School mission statement, grounded by our history as one of the oldest publicly supported schools in Wisconsin. Mineral Point School District is the heart of a small community that educates and inspires our students for a bright future in a big world. Angie, we'll take roll call.
Bush.
Here.
Dunn.
Yes.
Harris.
Here.
Heisner. Here. Letka.
Here.
Johnston. Here. Gelman.
Here. Hey, Mr. Wainwright, can I confirm that there's no recognitions?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. All right, then we'll move to approval of minutes. I'll motion to approve all the minutes from the board retreat, the regular meeting on June 13th, and the operations committee meeting on June 27th, or separately.
I'll move to confirm the minutes.
Motion to approve. Discussion. Angie?
Harris.
Yes.
Heisner.
Yes.
Letka.
Yes.
Johnston.
Yes.
Gelding.
Yes.
Bush.
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Okay, next we'll go to communications. Start with any board communications received. Tony?
So looking back at my emails, I don't believe I received anything that did go to the entire board. One specific that I'd call out is just from a community member who had expressed concern about a variety of topics, particularly the way we had handled some recent budgeting conversations amongst others. And I think you're probably all aware of the email. I think we all received the same one. But
Nothing in addition to what Joni had. I had one, besides that email, one person reach out who had moved to a different part of Mineral Point and had come from a place that had bus access in the city of Mineral Point, and their new house wouldn't have that, although it's pretty far away from the elementary school. So I encourage them to get in touch with Mitch about that and the bus company. And I understand there's been some discussions about if there's a way to address that or not. So that was it.
No new communication.
I had one parent reach out about if the updated COVID mitigation plan was going to be shared with families before registration.
Oh, good question. I mean, we'll have a discussion when we certify the student handbooks.
We're supposed to have that discussion tonight, well, with all of the other building administrators, and yes, that would be an addendum that would address COVID mitigation, would be part of that, those handbooks moving forward. So they would be shared prior to the start of school.
Or are they shared during orientation? Is that right? Every parent gets a copy of it, or electronically shared?
It's available electronically. I know Ms. Stahl usually does like a 6th grade orientation night, at which point it's shared specifically with the 6th graders. And in the past, we've had meetings prior to, but it is available online as well, and we can make parents aware that it's there in the specific location.
I actually had 3 different people, likely from the same stores, reach out from a Facebook posting that the school was going to pay track renovation. I think they chose words to read, so I had to let them know that was discussed as part of fundraising project at this point, or looking into ways to fund. Received some of the other emails, and I did receive an email I think we all got earlier today from First Student
Yes.
on electric buses that I think we should it's a lottery to the government buys electric buses. We should look into first student. They kind of act like they will help us with the application.
I sent it to Mitch.
Okay,
Mitch asked him
okay.
if we were gonna look into that, and
I met
you can
with,
clarify that now, I
yeah,
suppose.
I met with Andrew Peterson, who was like the district rep for First Student. We had that discussion. There's still a limitation on distance that these buses could travel. And some concerns that there is no charging station. Nobody has set up anything like that. It's something that we will probably continue to qualify for based on our location and our size. And First Student is willing to help us, but right now we don't want to be the first one in something like this.
So your sense, this is something we would relook at annually?
Yeah, I think so. You know, if there's more interest and more traction, and well, even like propane is another option, and we would need a stop somewhere that would allow the buses to get propane to run a little bit more efficiently. There are some other circumstances that go on with propane versus gas, diesel versus. We are picking up 2 gas buses versus diesel buses, which should help reduce some of the costs a little bit in transportation. But yeah, the electric is still not really viable for us out here yet.
Can you unpack that a little bit, Mitch? Why it's not viable?
Well, we need a charging station
That's
for
not-
multiple
Yeah, go ahead.
for multiple buses,
Right.
and we don't have anything. There's nothing like that around at this point in time. And while the technology is getting better for bus transportation, it's probably still not where I think it would make it a viable option for a school district to look at something like that. If we were in the city of Madison, something like that, shorter bus runs would be certainly something for us to consider. But when we talk about longer bus runs, winter bus runs, athletic bus runs, field trip bus, those kinds of things, then we'd start to run into some limitations. And that was the conversation I'd had with this Andrew Peterson from First Student.
They have a mileage estimate of how far they can go.
I want to say it was no more than 300, but I'm not quite sure that was it.
Yeah.
So that, those are some of the same concerns First Student had shared with me. They wanted me to be aware that while they have been approached, and now schools are approached with this opportunity, they still had some of the same concerns we would have as far as the busing is concerned.
They could have addressed those concerns in their email that came from them.
Right. So clearly, pretty nice email to a board that you really already talked to about it. So one of those things. But
Right.
yeah, good to put it on the radar for the district. Okay, we're at board communications received. I didn't have anything additional. Did you? Is that everything
That's
for you? Okay. All right. Now we'll go to citizen communications. We have anybody signed up? Anyone here want to speak? Anyone online? You can use your raise your hand icon. Or once, one twice. Okay. Next is information discussion items. We'll have the operations committee report from Chair Skelding. We're going to talk more in closed session about this safety plan. Okay. Yeah.
I guess high level for the group, Mitch ran through the procedures that are in place today, which we'll talk more in detail in closed session. We kind of talked through on at minimum once per year. That's right, Mitch, isn't it?
Yes.
So I think once we all kind of hear that, we'll have more questions, just like we did when Mitch kind of talked us through it, but it was a good procedure and all processes in place. Then in terms of like the facility plan, Went through the wish list from the elementary school. There's a couple, I'll call it just do it's. Kind of just go and do them, and it was getting panels for the side lights, school doors, address concerns with policy in the previous bullet point I talked about. Other than that, once we get a new director on board for maintenance, their task will be to review that list with building principal and kind of start knocking them down one by one. Talked about the weight room upgrade. There was a couple, I guess we'll call it a request for proposal a couple years ago to look at what it would cost for us to get something like that. So we kind of talked through those different options. Football boosters are currently raising funds to pay for a concession stand. Kind of back up what Mitch talked about, how long ago where no taxpayer money would be used to support that. That's all but covered, or that's everything is covered by
Fundraising efforts, yeah.
Lots of talk around a master plan for the elementary school playground. There really is no master plan. So it was really kind of the action from that was for Mr. Renwick to take that action and see what he wants to do long term. Talked about the track at the elementary school. Thought it'd be a good fundraising opportunity, not money in the budget, but talk to people in the community to see if they want to help support that. Member Dunn and Member Johnson, we're going to look into that one a little bit more and explore it in the community.
Yeah, and were we working on getting a quote?
We are working on getting a quote.
Okay.
I don't have it yet, but
Sure.
yes.
Sure. Just to make sure that was in motion.
Then we talked a little bit about solar on schools. When Doug came to the board, the previous board meeting we had, and kind of touched on it for 5-10 minutes. So Aaron reached out to a couple folks in Darlington and they set up something a couple years ago. So we're gonna look to schedule some time to have them come in here and kind of give a lessons learned, like what went well, what did they learn, paying off, did they make the right decision? So we all thought it's something that we're exploring, just more detail we want to learn from. And then last item was, an ask of all the building level administrators to develop a wish list for capital projects. We can start to have a list and funnel that together and look at dollars and come up with a long-term plan. Miss anything?
My notes. Anyone who wasn't there have any questions?
I have some assumptions, but can you confirm why you said there's a part that we're speaking about in closed session? My assumption is it's because it is safety protocols and to keep them safe, I just want to make sure that anybody who's listening understands that we're not being, we are purposely being non-transparent for the safety of our students in that one small slice of information.
Correct. Yeah,
correct?
exactly how you just said it there.
Just comment that this, without being there, seems like it was nice. I was good for getting a lot done.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
Yep.
All right, we'll move on to action items. First is approving the transfer of funds into Fund 46.
We have Johnson and Blocken doing our annual audit. They'll be here for the 2 more days. They were in all day today. We have typically had a surplus and we'll have a surplus again at the end of this fiscal year. When they're completely done with their audit, there will be a surplus that we will ask to transfer into Fund 46 into our capital maintenance And when I ask for you, and I don't have the dollar amount, they hope to have that to me by Wednesday when they've completed their audit, at which time I can tell you what that dollar amount would be. But they asked, because we need to have a check written from Fund 10, fiscal year 21-22, Fund 10, to Fund 46 by the end of the month. And we've done this in the past. If you look back at last year's board meeting, we did the exact same thing. They're asking that if there's anything that's prepaid or any outstanding bills, that money would stay back, but the remainder of the money would be transferred into Fund 46. That would be the motion that I would ask to have any remaining surplus, budget surplus transferred into Fund 46, minus any prepaid bills or outstanding bills.
Do you have any rough estimates on these amounts?
I do not. Typically, like for maybe an outstanding bill, they recommend about $20,000. There are a couple of prepaids you approved, prepaying our EMC insurance and our CISA. So those two together amount to about 150.
Those are good rough estimates.
Well, 30,000 for CISA, and I think,
Okay.
EMC is not quite 120, but let's round that to 120.
Okay.
So those you've already approved. We've already written the checks, sent them off for budgetary purposes for their audit. That has to remain. It'll be a fund balance June 30, out of fund balance July 1. So that's basically being taken care of on the paperwork side of things. They recommend about a $20,000 for in case there's any bills that come in last minute that were still part of last fiscal year. So anything above and beyond that will be transferred into Fund 46.
Fund 46 is our
Capital
capital
maintenance.
maintenance.
Yep. So that they started seal coating the dry. That was one of the projects that was approved out of Fund 46. So any surplus will go back into that fund.
And in doing so, we ensure that we receive the maximum amount of revenue that we can receive, because if we leave a balance more than the minimum 20,000 we might need to cover an outstanding bill, our income is reduced, correct?
The state aid would be reduced, correct? Yeah.
What's the difference between, I know the understand Fund 46, but then we also have a fund, sort of like a rainy day fund, and I don't know what that's called, but where there's some amount of money to cover, discrepancies, something like $1.5 million or something.
That would be the fund balance.
Fund.
And yeah, that would be, that would not be something we would want to be doing, is having to use that or something that was, if we budgeted 30,000 and it came in at 130, that would be something fund balance would cover, but that's not what fund balance, we really want fund balance to be used for.
Right. So, and I think we had talked about it's like a 15%.
The board policy clarifies that it needs to be at least 15%. We are currently right around that 19 to 20%.
Right. So just apologies for this is all new to me. But that, when you talk about the fund balance, what fund are we talking about? So Fund 46 is one fund, which is just the general fund.
Fund 46 was established through a board vote.
I mean, but I'm talking about the $1.5 million you said.
Is there a number associated with fund balance? Is a fund number?
Is that Fund 10?
It is a Fund 10
That's fund
balance, and it is fluid in that it's cash on reserves, assets, so it's not all necessarily dollar for dollar.
Right.
And then we don't have our state aid. Do I need to use a line of credit we've established through Farmer Savings Bank, or can we use some cash flow out of fund balance and then replace it? So that dollar amount tends to move as well, as long as we stay within that board policy.
So how do we decide as a board about that fund moving up? Let's say, if the board policy is 15%, how did it get to 20% now? and what happens. And I'm saying, like, instead of putting this in Fund 46, should we allocate that money to this fund balance to help grow the rainy day gap, boost it up to 2 million, let's say?
You certainly can. That's why my recommendation is to go to Fund 46. As Member Heisner pointed out, if the money is spent and sent to Fund 46, then the state aid looks at that as money expended in the fiscal year. If you were to say, no, I deny, I don't want to do this, I want to leave that money in fund balance, then the state will look at that and say, you didn't need this dollar amount. We're going to reduce your state aid next year by that dollar amount.
Right. Okay, understood. So how did this fund balance grow then over time?
Because those decisions had been made in the past to allow the money to stay in fund balance prior even to the creation of Fund 46.
There were
That
some
makes
years,
sense.
We also have to put a number on this in July, or sometimes we knew what the, we may have had a year where we put 250 away, and the surplus ended up being 10.
Right.
Or we had to have a number on it before, and then the 60 we just got. It's grown a bit just from the surpluses.
And then in those years when you have those surpluses, and then you're keeping it back in the fund balance, were we getting less state aid the next year? Or
Yes.
okay, it all makes sense now. Thank you for your time.
And if you remember, we were, working on that balanced budget, some capital maintenance numbers were.
Right.
So Fund 46 will help offset that if that need comes up for this upcoming fiscal year.
Okay. Thank you.
Mitch, what should the wording be in order to allow you to make the transfer for whatever the amount is? Have a proposed wording.
To transfer any budget surplus above or prepaid expenses and outstanding bills.
And leaving approximately $20,000 for.
you'll need that in the motion.
You'll need that in the motion.
It
Right.
says whatever is needed for prepaid expenses and
The outstanding bills.
outstanding bills. That gives-
Prime example, we just got a bill last week that I put in, or some work that was done in the previous fiscal year, but I just got the billing here at school now. So it's after the end of last fiscal year. So the budget process allows you to wrap up your fiscal year in the next 30 days.
It's estimated it will be around.
Around
Just for second discussion purpose.
I make a motion that authorize the transfer remaining budget surplus after payment of outstanding and prepaid expenses. Perfect.
I second.
Just for sake of discussion, do you want to finish explaining what Fund 46 is and how it's advantageous to us? And how it kind of came about, just briefly?
We had to, the school board had to authorize creating a Fund 46, and any dollar amount that was put in, you had to wait at least 5 years before you could actually make any expenditures out of it. Now it can be a little more fluid. So whatever money's put in this year, we don't have to wait 5 years to spend. Fiscal year 21-22, we've hit that window. And it's for larger capital maintenance projects that the district may come across. A couple of years ago, we redid the driveway. The main driveway here at the high school, middle school parking lot was getting filled with potholes. And so we were able to take that out of a Fund 46 expense. We redid the gymnasium. So larger expensed items that don't fit within the regular school budget are things that can be expenditures for Fund 46. All of those expenditures have to come through the school board as well. So that's why every year there's usually a list that the maintenance director and I would put together. We might meet with operations, talk through some of the projects, the associated costs. Then it would come to the school board for final approval for us to do some of those things.
You said the district had to do it. Was that required by the state that every district?
The school board has to had to approve
Right.
those
So
things.
it's an opportunity that the school board took advantage of. Is
Correct.
that correct?
It's not a requirement, but it also then tends to be a little bit more, to go back to Will's, the rainy day fund. It has to be capital maintenance, but something happens and all of a sudden we've got a leak in a roof. We didn't put that in the budget, but this Fund 46, come to the board, get the approval. Fund 46 would allow that to make repairs and get those kind of things done. So it's larger dollar amounts, bigger projects that are not part of the normal operating operating.
So it's kind of a capital rainy day fund. That doesn't count against us, our state aid, by saving the money. And for some reason, there was some stipulation that when you first put your pot of money in, you have to wait 5 years to use it. And so
A lot of schools are going to like building referendums and operating, and not necessarily to build, but it might be a capital maintenance referendum because we've got all these windows we have to replace, and we need a new roof over the gym, and Madison was looking at this saying, well, we keep sending you all this money, but you're not spending it on your buildings. And every district to a T is saying, no, we're spending that inside the building. We're spending it on students and classrooms and materials and supplies and education. So then the state said, all right, we'll allow something like this to happen. So those were the guidelines that created Fund 46. And the school board made that decision. And you could put $1 in when it was first created, as long as you waited 5 years, and you could start putting it in. But it was when the first dollar was actually put into Fund 46.
now we can put money in it every year with no limitations
Correct.
of when we use it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion about the transfer? Would you call question?
Metka,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Gelding,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Next is approval of academic standards.
Every year in July, the school board needs to approve the academic standards for the upcoming school year. Basically, it's what courses or program options we provide here. I won't read the entire list, but I'll give you kind of a Reader's Digest version where it's agriculture, food and natural resources, art and design, business and information technology, early learning, English language arts, environmental literacy, health sciences, information and technology literacy, mathematics, music, personal finance, physical education. So it's basically the courses that we offer here as a school. There's also a link to the website for the DPI to review any additional academic standards that you think we may want to add, but this basically meets our requirements and the staffing that we have available to provide these academic standards. Children who reside within the school district of Mineral Point have the following education options: attendance at public schools. They can attendance at private schools, participating in the Wisconsin Private School Choice Program, charter schools, virtual schools, full-time open enrollment. Youth options are also things that every school district in the state of Wisconsin provides their students as well. Those would be our academic standards that we would be asking for approval for the 22-23 school year.
A motion to approve the academics.
Question, Etka? Are these unchanged from last year?
Yes.
I have a quick question. Is there anything that the district would like to see on there, but we're unable to at this time for whatever reason?
I don't believe so, no.
We've heard over the course of the last 12 months about a few additional course offerings. I think the ones that come to mind are like a media and technology space, and maybe something in a literature space as well.
And like an English, one would fall under the umbrella of the English language arts.
Okay.
The media one would fall under the information and technology literacy. So
Okay.
they would
So
fall
they're
under,
wrapped into this.
yeah, larger umbrella. We don't talk about, you have to have Algebra 1 and geometry. We provide math standards in mathematics, and we meet all of the DPI requirements for graduation.
Any discussion, questions?
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Metka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Gelding,
Yes.
Next, we'll move to approval of handbooks. First is the safety booklet.
Correct. And this is not, here's what we do for our safety drills. The safety booklet is more, here's in order who to contact, depending on what building level it is. I will ask that you approve the safety booklet with the exception that the maintenance director will become a new name once we hire a maintenance director. When we felt we were bringing a name forward tonight for approval, that name was inserted into the safety booklet as in the proper positioning. So I would ask that you approve the safety handbook, noting that the new director of maintenance will be placed in the handbook where appropriate.
Were there any changes beyond names?
No.
I'll make a motion to approve this.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? I'm assuming the churches that are listed as evacuation sites are aware and willing to participate in this plan.
Prior to COVID, we actually had another drill lined up and the plan was to actually be near the end of the day, so bus pickup would be different. And then something happened in the world that prevented us from doing that. So, but that's on the radar as something we would like to practice in the near future.
Any discussion?
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Metka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Gelding.
Yes.
Bush, or Dunn.
Yes. Next is the employee handbook.
So the only updates, and you should have a 1-page. Did you make a copy of that or not? Or employee, yeah, there you go. So the only updates in the employee handbook were on page 75, where it was the substitute teacher pay. And on pages 77 and 78 was updating pay scale for both teacher effectiveness, compensation, and support staff pay. Those were the only changes made to the employee handbook.
Okay. Motion to approve this handbook.
Make a motion to approve the employee handbook.
Gelding, Johnston, by here. Any other discussion?
Gelding.
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Metka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. This is the high school student handbook.
Mr. Austin, would you care to speak about the high school handbook?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me or no? I'll take that as a no.
Looks like he's unmuted.
Trying.
Your volume, Mitch?
No,
How about now?
no.
No, give me one second.
Go ahead, Mr. Austin.
Now?
No.
No.
Wow.
What about that sound icon at the bottom of the screen there?
I think that's right.
Here? That's our
At the
microphone.
bottom right of the
Yep.
screen. Time
Testing.
right there. Is that?
Can you hear me or no? Maybe it's that.
They're all in red.
Can you hear me or no?
I think us being muted is not the issue.
No, and we are not muted.
The speaker's plugged in and turned on.
Yeah.
Oh, let's try this.
Matt, if you can hear us, if you just want to use your cell phone to call in if you can. And then-
Yep.
Okay, it's like you're on it. Great.
I'm just gonna chime in here. I can hear Matt. I think it's something on the school board end. Agreed.
Unmute. Unmute the phone.
How about now?
There you go.
I'm starting to think it's on our.
Yeah, it's on our end.
All right, I'm gonna do it with the phone and this so I can see.
One second, Matt. We think it's on our end.
Can we have somebody else?
Can you can hear me or no?
I think Sarah's on the line.
Sarah, can you try talking?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can actually hear myself on my computer.
I can hear him as well, so I think it's on the school board side.
Yeah, she's trying also.
Somebody just asked me and said that they can hear Matt, so it's on the school board or on our.
I know, I just saw it happen. I just noticed the red light over there. Yeah.
Yeah, all like all three of us at the same time.
Well, that's the microphone. That's not the speaker. I think they can hear us. He's just.
Hang on, let's try it.
Are you talking now, Matt? You're on mute.
Can you guys hear me off of Miss Dahl's phone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna turn my computer down because I'm getting feedback. Maybe that won't work that way. I gotta be able to hear you guys. Not really major changes to the student handbook. If you look at the first page or second page where the daily schedule is, you'll notice that the middle school and the high school changed their homeroom and advisory. It used to be at the advisory used to be at the end of the day. We had a homeroom similar schedule kind of at a snack break time. What we've noticed or what we've seen is some delay in some learning loss that I believe we can address with kids when they're fresh in the morning. So that's the reason why we moved advisory to the beginning of the day. Homeroom is new. That's to get student count or attendance count and lunch count. And it's also to do our announcements live. That's next year.
Do you have any concerns with students who are chronic procrastinators, saving their homework and then trying to get it done in that 15 minutes in the morning?
I think there's always chronic procrastinators.
I may live with some.
So yes and no. I think it's more treated as an area or a reason to get better help in the morning. So if we have a test coming up or something was really tough the next day, they might not be able to get into teachers at the end of the day. You know, if they leave for something or this happens at the end of the day, we typically probably didn't have best of access this week. We'll probably have better access in the morning. Or I'm looking at the high school level, if there's a science test on a Tuesday, I'm hoping you have a study session during that advisory period so that they can prep for that day. So we're not waiting till 2 seconds before the test to ask a question. So are there kids that are going to wait? Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be realistic about it. But do I think there'll be a big issue? No, I don't.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions about the schedule part? A lot of it is to address learning loss, to help us boost our, just to get some better access to teachers in the morning. Hopefully with them being a little bright-eyed in the morning, we can get a little better access there. The rest of it, if you were to look at it, it's probably got a lot of red throughout it. You'll notice a lot of it was just to clean up some language to better explain things, because obviously we know that if it's better explained, people grasp onto it. We did take the lockers off the locks, or the locks off the lockers, sorry, in the high school. We found out that a lot of kids aren't using them. They're putting pencils in them. They're getting jammed. It's creating a lot more work. So if they want a locker, they can, or a lock for their locker, they can request a lock. We can gladly put it back on. It takes about 30 seconds to put the lock back on. But rather than having kids shove pencils or plastic pens, things in there that break, you just took the locks right off so they don't have to worry about that part. If you keep scrolling through, like I said, a lot of it is stuff that Janet went through and kind of cleaned up the language so it matched more along what we were doing. Added the early college credit program, Start College Now. The attendance policy, we updated that a little bit just to make sure that we're covering all of our bases that way too. So a lot of it's just kind of cleaning it up, looking at other examples and making it, making sure that we're on top of everything.
Was the COVID mitigation stuff now amendments in the handbooks?
Everybody's handbook, I believe, if you scroll all the way to the, I think it's all the way at the bottom of this, where we talk about, sorry, I'm scrolling as I go, student illness and accidents, all the way down at the bottom. I believe everybody's handbook matches the same policy or same writing.
Maybe we discuss this in the August board meeting, but we're not entering 2023 in like a green, yellow, red, right?
No.
Okay.
So, I mean, that can be discussed, but I mean, I think the part of the discussion today is, are we satisfied with how the handbook is handling COVID as a contagious illness like other potential outbreaks? And are we satisfied with that moving forward in lieu of a specific mitigation plan? And the language that I'm noticing here, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but it sounds like that, it says the school system will adhere to the restrictions and regulations concerning contagious diseases issued by the Wisconsin State Board of Health, as well as be consistent with the most recent CDC recommendations and guidelines.
Yeah, that is what I believe we were asked to put in there, and then every handbook, I believe, has it all laid out that way.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think on the one hand, it doesn't offer a lot of specifics, but on the other hand, it basically says we're going to follow what the Wisconsin Board of Health recommends. Department of Health and Human Services, County Health Department, and up-to-date CDC recommendations and guidelines. And I think that gives the school and the school nurse leeway to kind of flow and adapt as anything evolves, whether it be COVID or some other contagious disease.
CDC removed their colors from their guidelines.
No.
So technically, we'll be starting the school year under e-color.
Well, so I think the question is whether that's going to be some kind of a masking requirement, or whether it will be, those are guidelines, those are recommendations for masking. So I think that, the question is whether that's going to be, we're going to encourage students to follow masking guidelines in accordance with the zones that the CDC says that we're in, and let students and parents kind of follow that.
This wording is specifically.
Yes, it's how we're going to handle an outbreak. Correct.
Yeah, because if you think back several months ago, Member Seaver was here and kind of talked about not having to have the specific language, but other than, there are reasons the student could be asked to stay home, multiple reasons, health concern reasons, and then try to put that kind of a language into the handbook. So that's what has happened here.
And masks are now part of the school dress code as acceptable if the student chooses, correct?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, Matt, do you know if a student chooses to wear a mask, that's allowable? I'm assuming yes, but, that probably should be spelled out, since it is kind of a covering.
Correct.
And maybe some people can take advantage of it and, wear certain masks that may be inappropriate. I don't know.
Well, so the inappropriate part would not be okay anyways, because we don't allow inappropriate clothing of any sorts, whatever it is. But we don't have anything that says they can't wear a mask. Obviously, we're still in this pandemic in that sense, so I have no problem if a kid feels more comfortable wearing a mask still. We don't have anything specifically stated in the section H on page 22 for our dress code about masks. But we do have the right to, if it's anything inappropriate, obviously we ask them to change if it's a shirt or anything like that. So if it's an inappropriate mask, I'd give them a different mask. We still have other masks and stuff. So
In other words, if it's not disallowed in the dress code, then it's allowed without explicitly saying it in the dress code.
I would say so. I would say that's one of those rules that falls, within this scope that we're in still. Unless you guys want to go the other direction and say it's not, but I guess I'm not going to make a big point over it if it's going to make somebody feel more comfortable, or if they've been exposed or anything like that. There's no sense of drawing attention to that. I would hope they tell us if they've been exposed or something like that, or if they haven't, but with the school nurse and talk to the school nurse, but I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it, I would guess, in this sense.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I think Sarah had her hand up, but I don't.
I did, but we kind of covered it because we did go through the whole discussion when I originally proposed the health policy when I was on board about whether or not masks were allowed in the current dress code, and the consensus was across the board for both the middle, high, and elementary school that they were.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Our audio is not working too.
Oh yeah, audio's not working. Matt, you could probably try your audio. I want to. That works.
I might get some feedback now. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep,
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. That beats holding my phone up to my ear.
I think Sarah opened the wormhole or something. Anyway, okay. Good, that helps. I don't have any other questions unless you feel like there's going to be really specific, like significant concerns of specific enough. I feel like kind of to the contrary, that our stance is we're going to try to follow what's recommended. And just use that as a continued reference that
Agree with any other.
is a solid standing and allows us to be consistent.
I do see one that catches my eye. Number 12 under dress code says that blankets, hats, or hoodies, and then hoods in parentheses are to be worn in the school building during the school day. You're referencing specifically having the hood up. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Hooded sweatshirts are still acceptable as long as the hood is down.
They are acceptable as long as the hood is down. At times we do have challenges with that, but
Okay.
we just wanted to make sure it was a little bit better explained because up above is kind of what it said. Number 7 up above is what it said previously. So that's why it's read number 7 will obviously go away in the final version. So just to explain it a little better.
I don't know what page this is on. The homecoming eligibility and selection Those were updated in the past few years, correct?
So we had the student government, look at the selection process, because that was what was brought up. And they voted to stay with what had been used in the past. That was probably, I want to say 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. But yes, the student government actually talked with their class. They pulled it and they voted to keep kind of everything the same, other than they added a king. Was the first time last year we added a king. So it would have been 2 years ago we looked at that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that is spelled out in the handbook. Is that right, Matt?
I think that might be in the activities or athletic handbook. Miss Dahl, do you know?
Right now, what is that?
Oh,
He's working on it.
okay. Sorry.
Page 179, that's ringing a bell right now. Very specific. What is in the athletic code is 17. That's on page 7. Under group C.
Eligibility homecoming court, page 17 of the athletic handbook.
Are we going to do the handbooks one at a time, or do we want to jump ahead?
Oh, I don't think we should jump ahead. That was just a question.
Yeah, sorry, that was, I
It's in
didn't
the-
realize that
it's
was
in the
in
next handbook.
next handbook.
Matt, do you want to resume your summary of the high school handbook? If you have anything else you want to highlight?
Like I said, most of it's just Janet went through. We reviewed it. We cleaned some language up to better explain it, because we obviously want to make sure that everything's clear. We did change around, like I said, the advisory period, just to help with learning loss in the future, hopefully to address some other things. All students will be in the building during that time, so everybody will report at 8 o'clock. Everybody will be there during homeroom advisory. We're looking at, like I said, taking attendance during homeroom, doing our live announcements, also doing a lunch count, which we haven't done in the past, but hopefully we'll save some money and stop wasting a little bit of food here and there. Because I'm sure that's going to come back on somebody at some point. So we're just trying to clean up some things, but advisory will go to the morning. We cleaned up some of the language as far as cars and everything that way too, just to better explain it.
Looks like the 210 plan is staying the same,
Yes.
more or less.
Yep. 210 plan will stay the same. There may be one factor that'll change in the future, but I don't think it will, to deal with the enrichments, because that's going to look a little different with advisory being at the beginning of the day. So we're working on those details. But now everybody will be in here during the day for the whole day.
I guess one suggestion I would have for the 210 for future thought, and I comment on this almost every year, especially coming out of a pandemic. I would like an exception if the student nurse sends a student home, or if they're suffering symptoms of a contagious disease, that not count against the 210 plan, because I think it's kind of silly coming out of a pandemic. And I know you don't count it against them, but it doesn't say it in the policy. And I think encouraging sick children to attend school is a bad message.
I would ask that you still give me that that ability to make that call. I guess I would ask that you continue to give me that ability to make that call, because I'm going to work with people. There are things that come up.
Yeah, and just so
but I know what you mean.
Parents,
I can add a clause in there under the absences any absence due to sickness, due to extreme sickness needs to be cleared with the high school principal. If you wanted, we could add that in there.
I think I just like it just so it's codified, you know, I do worry that kids worry about it, you know, I don't want to miss out on 210. I don't want to miss out on 210. I want to come to school. That's it, you know.
Yep. I can add that clause in there.
Thank you.
Yep.
That looks like you cleaned up the language around cell phone use during the school hours.
Yep.
I'm not opposed to it, but it's impressively strict. I mean, students are not allowed to call or text their parents from their cell phone during the school day
Well, so
unless permission is obtained.
during class periods,
Okay.
during class periods, we do allow them to check them in between class times. But we do have problems at times with certain kids that'll pull it out and just start texting away to their parent, even though they're in the middle of a lesson or something like that. So that is really where that's drilling down to. It's during the class periods. In between classes, we do allow them to check their phones. We did put a clause in there about headphones because we do have a lot of kids that are listening to music and tuning out everything else versus being engaged in what they are learning or actively learning. So we did put a clause in there about the headphones. So unless you ask to use them, if you want to use them during work time, fine, but make sure you ask, just like anything else.
I'm on page 13.
The cell phone,
Yeah, I mean, it's just a little,
page 13.
it's just a little confusing. I mean, if I'm a student or a parent reading it, you know, first it says, I'm not allowed to call or text my parents from my cell phone during the school day unless permission is obtained. And the parents are instructed to use the office to deliver messages. And it says, students are not to use electronic devices during class periods, except when specifically directed by a teacher or staff member. And then it says cell phones are allowed in all common areas. Okay. Except you can't use it during lunch.
We don't allow it during lunch. Otherwise we feel like there would not be, we feel like there'd be a limited conversation during lunch if they had their phones on them.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. Okay, so they are allowed during passing times, including before and after school. Okay, so that's kind of the caveat to that in first paragraph.
Yeah.
Got it.
We do ask if parents have a true emergency, call the office so we can go get the kid and talk to them versus trying to call or text them, you know, call me right now, because it's probably best if we can remove them from the classroom if there is something that is an emergency and have them in the office or somewhere in private that they can talk to their parents.
Thank you.
I guess I agree with Aaron. On some level, this language is a little confusing because in the red at the top of the page, it says students are not allowed to call, text their parents, guardians from their cell phone during the school day. But then outside of class, cell phones are allowed in all common areas. So it's like they're allowed to have a cell phone, but they're not allowed to call or text their parents, I guess is what you're saying.
I think we probably just need to add the language during class periods.
Right, I agree.
I think that, and then just to add to this, I mean, I think like during class periods, that they're just, if you're not allowed to use their cell phone, then cell phones shouldn't be allowed in the classroom. I don't see what would be the point of, because it's only going to lead to temptation, right? I mean, what's the point of having this, allowing them to have the cell phone in the classroom?
There might be times when staff members want students to do a video project. And I'm included on some of these emails. Hey, my third hour class will be using their cell phones to record things. You know, it's a class assignment. Please let me know if students are abusing. You know, so I mean, there's times teachers will say, Now, here's a video camera. Everybody's got one in their pocket. So I think there's where sometimes there's a reason why the teacher will say, bring your cell phone to class today. You're going to be using for a class project. So I think to try to define it that specifically is difficult. I'll go one step further. I didn't think our kids knew how to get from one classroom to the other. I thought they were all using Google Maps because every day the bell would ring in between classes and everybody's doing this, walking from one room to the next. I thought, guys, the building isn't that big. You don't need Google Maps to figure out where your next classroom is. There are times, not going to lie, there are times where it's like, hey, I need to get out early today. Would you call the office and let them know? Like, well, they can do that between class, and they are doing things like that between class. But it's not, we don't want them, yeah, I need to go to the bathroom, grab my cell phone, go to the bathroom and make that phone call or send that text or things like that. It's a matter of trying to get kids to focus on what's going on in the classroom. There are times those are important to the classroom, and other times they're a distraction in the classroom.
Yeah, but it's kind of like being on a plane and everybody says, okay, we're going to shut off our cell phones, and you know that a third of the people aren't, and they're sitting there texting and whatever, and that's interfering with their traffic control or what have you. I actually, this is an issue I'm pretty interested in, and I'll throw it out there that I don't think there's a good reason to have cell phones in schools. I've looked into this in Wisconsin, and there's several schools in our size that have basically just banned cell phones altogether during the school day. And they've had really good results in terms of academic performance and also social performance. The kids are, once again, talking to each other, and there's less bullying and those sorts of things. And so the whole thing with the video in the classroom, I mean, I get it, but all of us went to school without that, and we did just fine. So I mean, that's sort of where I'm at with all this stuff, and I would encourage all the principals to, and I guess you, Mitch, to think about that. And I can do more homework into some of those schools that have done those things if you're interested in contacting them. But
I'm just going to add, just for sake of discussion, that there are several students in our building who have an accommodation written in their plan that they can use their phone. My son has a hearing impairment. His hearing needs are controlled by his phone. So in order to change the setting for him to be able to hear in class, he uses his phone. It was part of his 504 plan. But with he's in college now, but he records lectures. They're transcribed. All of that is done through his phone. And we have other students in the middle school and high school who use those same technology resources to get the material that they need in order to do it. So just so if you pull out blanketed, and they're already written in plan, but there are exceptions, and there are really valid reasons why some students have their phone.
Sure, I understand, and I think anything, whether it was like masks with COVID, there were some kids that just couldn't wear them, and I understand that. But there's a lot of damage that comes from technology and cell phones as well, and I just see that with kids today. So, and I encourage the administration to address it.
Well, I would question if I think there's a lot of really valid reasons for a student to have a phone on their person before or after school if they participate in activities or if they arrange for transportation home after activities. If we did not allow them to carry those phones throughout the day, which I wouldn't be opposed to, we would then have to consider allowing or providing them a way to secure those phones during the day. And I just heard that we wanted to move away from the lockers lockers because of the issues. So different nuance, the issue.
Well, I think the bottom line is, as educators, make sure you're keeping an eye on the role personal cell phones play in distracting kids from performing in class. I think that's a real issue, and I question how well this handbook is able to be enforced on a daily basis, but I'm sure the effort is there.
I don't want to beat a dead horse too much, but maybe it would make sense to change the language here. Students aren't allowed to call or text their parents or guardians from their cell phone during the school day. Something like students are not allowed to replace calls to anyone, including parents and guardians. Right now, it actually seems, if you read the policy, it's more restrictive to parents and guardians than it is to anyone else. I know that might not be the intent, but it is more restrictive to parents than it is to anyone else. Just a thought to maybe reword that a little bit for clarity's sake.
So have it say they're not allowed to text or call during class
Class
time
periods.
and lunch, right? Mr. Austin, that's what you said during lunchtime.
Correct. During lunch, they are not allowed to have their phones.
That seems more straightforward.
It does seem more straightforward, but in my mind, calling and texting is the least of concern that I have. My kids have their phones. It's the TikTok and the Snapchat and it's not texting mom to make sure that I,
No, but it's-
remember to pack their lunch.
It's texting the girl right in front of you.
That would be a concern.
So, you used to say they're not allowed to use their phones, period. During class.
Unless authorized by,
Unless by teacher.
which it sounds like you have a system in place that's working for that.
I can clean that up so it reflects that.
Sounds good. Anything else you want to mention, Matt, or anything, any other questions from the board members?
I don't have anything else to mention.
Make a motion that we accept this handbook as provided with additional revisions coming to the cell phone use policy.
And two.
And the 210 attendance policy.
When I get those updated, I will shoot it off to you guys, just so you know, so you can clear it.
After discussing any safety procedures during closed session, if any of that needs to be updated in the handbook, for whatever reason, could we go back and do that?
Yes, we could.
Okay. And I'll second.
Matt, I just want to say thanks for looking it over thoroughly and updating language and just trying to keep it as up to date as possible. I appreciate you putting the time in.
I gotta thank Janet for that. She goes through with a fine tooth comb to update it to make it a little clearer. So
Yeah,
Thank you, Janet.
yeah, I appreciate the intent around the cell phones.
It gets better every year, Continuous improvement.
Any other discussion before we vote?
Well, could you share some of those studies that you've looked at?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Angie, one question on the high school handbook.
Heisner,
yes.
Janetka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Gelding.
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Next is the athletic handbook. Ms. Dahl, any changes?
Not many. Usually mainly there's changes when the WIA makes a lot of changes in the rules and eligibility. I did add page 6 and 13 because our code is based off of athletics and activities. Under attendance, number 2, we used to just have the first part where it ended at principal, where a student is required to be in class the day after an athletic contest, unless the absence is pre-excused or there is extenuating circumstances as determined by the AD or the principal. It added, if a student is absent the day following the athletic event, they will not be permitted to practice or a scheduled contest on that day. You had student athletes, especially that like to come in late the day after an event, because they're tired and they really need to be here in school on time, unless it's excused by Mr. Austin. So that's the main addition that we made.
I don't have this in front of me, so I'm gonna ask for clarification. It's stating that they have to be here at school the following day.
Yeah.
Does it say anything about them having to be on time? Because I could come in at 9:30 and say, I'm here.
Yeah, I can put in there that needs to be here at the start of classes. I can do that. Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds important, given what you've experienced,
Yeah.
especially if they try to appeal. Anything else?
No, I mean, obviously, if they have a doctor's appointment, I'm gonna want to have a doctor note from the dentist's office. So,
Would it make sense to make them not participate in not only that day, the following day's practice, but also the next contest?
I would like to talk to my coaches about that first. I mean, I just want to make it the day after right now, because a lot of coaches, if they're not practicing, they're not gonna play that next day. So,
Just some-
yep, yep.
And not to belabor the point, but I'm assuming you'll, in terms of like COVID protocols, you'll be following the WIA guidelines
Yeah, we have,
as they're introduced.
it's part of their, permission form that they sign for athletics every year.
Okay. So there's some clarity on that. Okay.
We've talked about it before. I know the approach that we've taken in the past is to empower the student body to make edits regarding the homecoming court policy. I'll just express again that I feel like this policy is quite archaic and that we are valuing our boys based on their athleticism and our girls based on a popularity contest. And I don't know that that approach continues to make sense in this day and age. I also understand that Mineral Point holds our traditions very, very close to the chest. And so I don't know how much of a battle it's worth making over this. But I do want to express that I feel like this approach is outdated.
I agree. I think it's extremely exclusive.
Do you have any suggestions for, alternatives?
As I've stated in the past, I would be happy even if it was uniform between males and females. Not that we necessarily want to have popularity contests anymore, but if boys are on simply because they're athletes, then girls should be on simply because they're athletes. Or if girls have to be on because they were voted as most popular, or females, I should say, then the male attendants should also be voted on as most popular. But the fact that we have like two completely different sets of criteria about how somebody ends up on court, to me, it is really interesting. Again, I don't know that we put it before the student body in the last few years. They've opted not to change it. I don't know if we as a school board want to pick up this fight now, but I did want to bring it up to the group.
I think our options would be to, make a recommendation to administration that this is revisited by the student council or the student leaders on a regular basis. We could form an ad hoc committee of students, parents, community members, longtime pointers who, have been to every homecoming, or grand march,
Since before I knew where Mineral Point was on the map. Without it.
and maybe just have those discussions. What exactly are we celebrating? And more importantly, who are we not celebrating?
So,
Do we meet with student government and get their thoughts on the process that they went through to keep everything the same? Of adding a sport, correct? Is that what you said?
King. They added a
They
king.
added no, they added a king.
Well, Mr. Austin, if he's still on, which, yes, he is.
Yep.
I think he led that, inquiry, for lack of a better word.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, just to make sure. So to Joni's point, yes, the representatives are picked via vote. The king and the queen candidates were all voted on. So they were equally voted on. There was 3 queen candidates, 3 king candidates. Everything was voted on. That was actually equal this past year. So we added the king representative, which does not have to be an athlete. Just like the girls don't have to be an athlete, the king representative did not have to be an athlete. The escorts, Ms. Dahl can correct me if I'm wrong, but the escorts are senior football athletes or senior fall athletes, I should say, for the underclassmen, for everybody. The process, so we had a couple different meetings on this with the student council or student government at that point. We talked about it. We talked about some potential changes. We kind of went down the, would you like to see this? Would you like to see this? Would you like to change this? And then we came up with a vote, and they voted on it, which is where they added the king. They said they'd rather keep everything the same and then add a king candidate. That's what the winning vote was as far as the guidelines to select people. That being said, that was a couple years ago. I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. I did actually survey the area schools as well, and majority of them are still using the same similar system. There are ones where you cannot, if you serve on it 1 year, you're not allowed to serve on it another year. There's one school that you get to pick homecoming court, or you get to pick prom court or something like that, where you can only pick one or the other because they limit the number of representatives for each one. So is there a better system? I'm sure we could probably come up with a different system. Is it going to be better? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I know when they voted on it, well, it would have been 2 years ago, they voted to keep it the same, but add a king candidate, which is why we had a king candidate last year. But I do understand your concerns.
I think Christy brought up a good point. I mean, if there's interest in changing it, talk to the student government, and if there was opinions that were in the minority, we can flesh those out and see what they have to say.
Maybe that's something we can coordinate offline once the school year starts.
Yeah, I feel like we've invested enough time discussing this as a board already. I am good to approve as is, and if later there's an amendment, that would be fine.
I'm sorry, do we have a motion on the
Was
table?
that a motion?
Yeah, you can make the motion.
Yeah, I'm moving that we approve the student activities handbook as presented.
I'll second.
Has your Jeanette got any further comment or discussion?
Eisner,
Yes.
Janetka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Gelding.
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Okay, next is the middle school handbook. Ms. Dahl, any updates?
No updates.
The illness absence will be an addendum. The middle school always has theirs published. They have contest. Middle school students draw a cover, have a contest. So a middle school student draws the cover, then they have to get it off to a printer. So that will be an add-on, an addendum to the middle school handbook will be that illness absence language and following CDC guidelines.
Similar to the high school.
Similar to the high school and elementary school, yes.
Every one of our students folder at the beginning of the year, so they have all of our information.
We'll move to approve the school.
I'll second.
Our cell phone policy is strict. But you have to understand, middle school kids need to maintain their phone. That's why we're probably having certain policies.
As it should be.
Yeah.
They're a different age group. Probably. Yes, you know that before the. I appreciate that. Okay. I'm sorry, we had Harris Skelding. Okay, any discussion? Just making a note that we would add an illness addendum. Assuming the motion is including the handbook with that addendum to come. Okay, thank you.
Harris,
Yes.
Heisner,
Yes.
Janetka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Gelding,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Next is the middle school activity manual. Any comments on this, Ms. Dahl?
No changes on that.
Okay. Make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the middle school. handbook.
I'll second.
Alderman Heisner, any comments, concerns, questions?
Gelding,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Heisner,
Yes.
Janetka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Next is the elementary student handbook. Mr. Renwick, do you want to summarize some changes?
Sure. Just two main ones. The first one was added a sentence to the code of conduct. It's at the end of all the behavioral, what the negative behaviors are, and here are the consequences added. Help reduce negative behaviors and make better decisions in the future. A student may be offered and provided additional support from administration staff. Just acknowledging, I guess, the proactive approach that we've been taking, especially with Ulrich and Stein and the faculty and staff, to know that we're not just addressing the negatives, that we are trying to get out of it. And the other one was removing, and this is per, I believe, Severud's initial proposal, and then Jean Lindsay looked through it with Jean Barr, where we removed all of the examples of the most common reasons for exclusion. And they're all listed in the summary I shared. As well as headlights and the reason for a family to pick up a student from school. And again, that's on page 36. And then finally, we added, after the school system will adhere to the restrictions and regulations not contagious diseases issued by the Wisconsin State Board of Health. And we added, as well as be consistent with most recent CDC recommendations and guidelines. And that was a district request to include that in there. Monitoring different levels of guidelines.
So, Mr. Renwick, you removed the examples of the contagious diseases just because you wanted to maintain a little more flexibility with handling those issues.
I could be wrong. I think it came from.
Or is it just to clean it up?
Yes, it was to clean it up. It came out of the board discussion.
That we had previously? Okay,
Yes.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the elementary handbook.
I move to approve the elementary handbook as provided.
Johnston. Any further questions, comments?
Janetka,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Gelding,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Heisner,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Hey, thanks for getting through that. Only once a year. Okay, so next we have approval of the director of maintenance position
I would ask that we table that,
until the August meeting, maybe,
hopefully,
if not sooner.
if not sooner.
When we table something, do we have to specify when we table it to, or to which agenda we table it to?
Coming into yesterday, there was going to be a recommendation and then there was a change in that
I
recommendation.
understand, but I'm just like in terms of.
You can certainly say table to the next board meeting, or until there is a recommendation coming forward.
Okay,
Mitch, at this point, if we have a candidate who we would like to extend an offer to, will you call us to a special board meeting to get somebody in place as soon as possible?
Before the ink dries on a contract, yes.
Within 24 hours of when they say yes, and 48?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yes, if we could get something in line before that August board meeting, I would certainly do.
okay, so seeing that we do not have a recommendation for hire for the director of maintenance, I'll take a motion to table the approval until we have a recommendation for the position.
I would like to make a motion, but I move that we table the director of maintenance recommendation topic until the next time the board meets. Even if we don't, and the reason I'm saying that is even if we don't have a recommendation for approval in August, I think we need to revisit it anyway.
Sure. Okay, fair enough. Okay.
I'll second.
Second. Any comments or questions on that? So, but basically that means it'll be on August's agenda unless we hold a special meeting. Hey, Angie?
Eisner,
Yes.
Janetka,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Gelding,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes. Okay, next is approval post the district bookkeeper's position. Excuse me, do you want to summarize where we're at with that? And then I'll have Member Heisner as chair of the personnel committee give a brief presentation of what was discussed today.
We have an additional resignation from the district bookkeeper position. And at this point in time, we're looking to approve posting either a bookkeeper position or potential business manager position. There was a personnel committee meeting today at 1 o'clock where this discussion was hammered out a little bit more in detail and will be shared at this point.
So the personnel committee met today. The personnel committee includes myself as well as Member Johnston and Member Janetka, and then Member Dunn was also able to join us for the conversation today. We discussed quite at length the vacancy or the gap that is left within the district given the vacancy that we now have without a bookkeeper with any experience, and particularly reflecting on Marcia leaving with her 43 years of experience in that area, and the fact that the school finance landscape has become considerably more complex over the last 43 years. So we spent a fair bit of time talking about what it would mean if we looked at a position for a school business manager as opposed to a bookkeeper, and what having that additional title in a job posting may mean. We talked about ways that we could look at this as an investment in the future of the district, bringing a professional feel to that role. Let's see. We talked about paying for it because that's certainly an issue. When you add that title, it does become a more expensive item. And then we also touched very briefly on what can we do for an interim plan or to fill a gap between now and when we are able to put someone in place. And so on that front, Mitch was able to speak with, or Superintendent Wainwright was able to speak with WASBO, which is the Wisconsin Association of School Business officials. Thank you. I thought it was organization, but that didn't make sense. And they do have interim support that they can provide us. So hopefully that buys us time to make a good decision, not just a fast decision. Coming out of today's meeting, the Finance Committee would like to put the following recommendation before the board. I'm sorry, the Personnel Committee would like to put the following recommendation in front of the board. We would like to post a school business manager position / bookkeeper to become a school business manager position. Our intent would be that if this role is filled by a bookkeeper, that individual would commit to completing the school business manager certification courses necessary to have that distinction within 3 years of taking the role. We as a school would financially support the candidate to pursue that certification, but with the expectation that they would be committed to the district for a certain period of time afterwards. That length of time needs to be determined through some policy committee meetings, so we don't have that completely hammered out, but that there would be a commitment on behalf of the candidate to fulfill an obligation to the district after earning that certification or to pay back the cost of that education. We looked at that as an investment in financial resiliency. We looked at, we know we were getting some feedback from the community, at least in different places, that the school we need to think about the school as a business, run the school like a business, and putting a professional individual in the seat to run our financing seems like an appropriate thing to do if we consider the school a business. So really professionalizing the role, and then just the complexity of the school finance landscape and the uncertain future ahead of us around school finance, and looking at how we are going to navigate some challenging financial times ahead were all contributing factors to this recommendation. My fellow committee members, do you have anything that you would add?
No.
It's very nice.
No.
What does this certification cost?
So we looked at a program, somebody brought up the program through, I believe, a virtual program or online program through Whitewater, W Whitewater. And it was to the tune of like $85,000 or $86,500 to $8,600. So, and it looked like we thought it was probably somewhere between 18 months and 3-year program, depending on how quickly somebody were to move through the courses.
Because we want to acknowledge that they will also be working a full-time job.
Yes.
And sometimes in those certifications, the courses are not offered consistently. So
If you posted the role, the person that accepts it have to agree to going and getting that certification.
And we would be looking at posting it as a school business manager or somebody who has an interest in becoming a school business manager. It would be a matter of what the candidate pool looks like, and what we recognize that we probably can't afford to financially compete with school districts like Verona was the one that came up today. So that would be determined by our candidate pool.
Or just that maybe the part of the reason that we use the word, professionalize is more, how do you replace 43 years of experience? And you can't. So there's something else that needs to.
But some of that expertise also rely on superintendent's role.
Yeah, so we had talked today that bringing in a finance manager would potentially ease some of the burden that currently falls on Mitch, Superintendent Wainwright. He ultimately still has ultimate responsibility for signing off on a lot of things, but putting somebody in this role would either allow us to do some things like forecasting and some forward-looking things that aren't being done today, or free up Superintendent Wainwright to focus on other areas that where the school could, use his time and attention.
Looks like the difference in salaries. It looks like a school business manager would probably 25 to 30,000 a year more than a head bookkeeper, just as a general ballpark. So, wanted to leave in. I mean, as being present for the discussion, my impression of the committee's plan was to leave ourselves open to be able to hire up a head bookkeeper at maybe a more affordable price for the district. And then possibly enter in negotiations for them to grow into that role and give us some time to plan to be able to fund that position and invest in that position rather than potentially hiring a school business manager right out of the gate. Obviously, if that's the way the candidate pool went, we would have to have those discussions whether we want to make that investment by ASAP versus other options. We thought posting both gives us some flexibility.
To give some context, CISA 3 has 9 schools that currently have business managers. So this is not everybody else has one, but it's also not unusual for a school to have one. Many of those schools are in our same size range. And we did have feedback from 2 districts. And again, this was very short notice. We set this up and then there was a weekend and we met today. The 2 districts did provide feedback about the value that they've received from having a school business manager. Platteville, the Platteville superintendent just basically said he wouldn't work at a district without one, given the value that it brings. So another way to look at the position and the value it brings to the overall administration of the district.
Are you looking for a motion or is this just?
So this recommendation passed out of committee.
It passed out of committee 3-0. But clearly there's some financial impacts here. And if this is a direction we want to go about posting, not just a replacement bookkeeper, but a school business manager / bookkeeper to become a school business manager, we need to make a motion to give Mitch that direction. Or at least that's my interpretation of where we're at. You can disagree.
Yeah, no, I mean, so that's the recommendation out of committee after kind of having an hour and a half discussion about it. But, that recommendation can be revised or, whatever motion wants to come out of this board. If we have some hesitancy about the investment for this kind of posting, I think we should go in a different direction. Now's the time to have that discussion.
My recollection is that from our last meeting was that there was essentially, as things have evolved, $20,000 in cost savings because have a bookkeeper at a certain rate or assistant bookkeeper at a certain rate, and we no longer have head bookkeeper. So Tony, that was sort of your suggestion in the last meeting, is recognizing that there was about $20,000 available, and that has come to fruition. And as such, I'll make the motion to put forward the recommendation from Personnel Committee to make the posting for the business manager / bookkeeper, because I feel like actually funding is available.
second it.
Okay.
I think it ties to the actions we're talking about in our retreat. Let's do the stuff we're talking about.
Before we vote, I think it's only fair to point out, and it did come up during the committee discussion today, that we are looking at taking a bookkeeper position and making it, another administrative level position in a time when we did not backfill a second grade teacher. And again, that was driven by class size, but that decision was made, and other just budget challenges that we have had. So this is a decision that we as a board will need to continue to justify over coming weeks and months. And I feel, based on the conversations I've been a part of, that we have sound justification. But let's not pretend that we aren't in some difficult financial times and we're going to spend more than we would if we just said, well, we'll hire another employee.
And just for point of discussion, as I told Dr. Dunn earlier, that's why I won't support it. Did not give staff their full raise.
I guess we got a motion in a second. Well, I'm gonna support it because it still gives us the option to hire a head bookkeeper at a bookkeeper rate, which is what we're going to do anyway. So it expands our applicant pool and gives us some exposure to what maybe a school business manager can offer, and maybe make some allow us to maybe think through you as a school business manager versus a head bookkeeper, when we kind of see the candidates kind of head to head. And so I think it gives the district some flexibility financially without overcommitting. So that's why I'm going to support it. Any other discussion, questions?
One last plea I would say is that right now, when we're looking at our budget and things are tight, we look at how are we going to cut budget out of the classrooms, or what programs are we going to cut, or what positions can we eliminate? Having a business manager would give us a different avenue. Have somebody look at where our expenses are or where our revenue is, and is there a different way to look at that to find the cash flow we need to continue to offer the quality of educations and programs that we can know and expect in this district.
Anything else?
Harris.
Yes.
Heisler.
Yes.
Smith. Johnston. Yes. Gelding.
Yes.
Bush.
No.
Dunn.
Yes. Okay. I'll take a motion to move the approval of school safety protocols to after closed session.
So moved.
Seconded.
Need a roll call for that, maybe? Okay. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Let's move to credit card statement of activity and bills payable. I'll take a motion to approve them together or separately. Is there any significant clarification questions?
Maybe it's on there every time and it's never stood out to me before, but Aflac.
I don't know I don't think that's a monthly.
That might be more of a
Secondary insurance.
yes, that's basically what it is.
Okay, maybe because this does say this is your month, this. Review this month's statements, please follow these steps. But it is a secondary insurance that employees can choose to enroll. Then it's a cost.
It's just something we collect for and then
Yes.
pay.
Yes. I move to approve the credit card statement of activity and approval.
Second.
Commissioner Johnston? Any additional questions, concerns?
Connectney?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
Skelding?
Yes.
Bush?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Eisner?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'll take a motion to move into closed session to discuss the school safety protocols.
We'll move.
Okay. Need a roll call for that?
Yeah. Harris?
Yes.
Eisner?
Yes.
Janetka?
Yes.
Johnston?
Yes.
Skelding?
Yes.
Bush?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone online.